You're in the middle of something, working, reading, just thinking, when your phone screen lights up. It vibrates against the table, an unfamiliar number buzzing with an urgent, unwelcome demand for your immediate attention. Your chest tightens. A tiny jolt of adrenaline hits your system, and before you even register who it could be, one single overwhelming thought floods your mind. Why couldn't they just text? That single buzz suddenly feels louder than a siren. Your mind races through a frantic calculation. Is this a genuine emergency? A scam? A distant relative? The ringing feels less like a sound and more like a pop quiz you haven't studied for. So you do what feels safest. You stare at the screen, letting it ring out, and then a wave of beautiful, shameful relief washes over you. If that wave of relief leaves you feeling guilty, rude, or somehow broken, I want you to pause right here. That feeling is not a flaw in your personality. It's a perfectly rational response to the hidden architecture of modern communication. And to understand that architecture, we need to see that a text and a call are not just different. They operate in two fundamentally separate worlds. To understand why, we need to introduce a key distinction: synchronous versus asynchronous communication. A phone call is synchronous. It demands your immediate, undivided attention. It's a live performance happening in real time with no script and no editor. Texting, however, is asynchronous. It arrives, it waits, and it allows you to respond on your own terms. This isn't just about convenience, it's a fundamental difference in cognitive architecture. One is an ambush on your attention. The other is a quiet invitation. And it's that demand for an instant, unplanned performance that lies at the heart of the anxiety. A phone call is an empty stage where you're pushed into the spotlight without a script. You have no idea what comes next. And this feeling, this intense pressure to perform, is a recognized psychological phenomenon. We can call it communicative performance anxiety. MIT sociologist Sherry Turkle has dedicated her work to understanding this exact shift in our psychology. She found that the real fear isn't about the conversation itself, but about the loss of one crucial modern ability: the ability to edit. Turkle's insight is simple but profound. A text message is a draft. You can revise, polish, and present the version of yourself you want to be. A phone call, in contrast, is a live, unedited performance. The anxiety isn't about the conversation itself, it's the terror of a verbal stumble, a misplaced word that you can't take back. So why does our brain perceive this loss of control as a genuine threat? Because deep down, your brain is trying to protect you from social judgment. In a live conversation, every stumble, every awkward pause is permanent. There is no backspace key for speech. This isn't vanity. It's a fundamental ancient drive to maintain social standing. It's the psychological equivalent of being forced to perform in one of two very different ways. Imagine it like this. A phone call is improv comedy. You're pulled onto a stage, the spotlight is on, and you're expected to be brilliant, on command, with no script. Texting, on the other hand, is like being a poet. You have the quiet space to find the exact right word, to consider its texture and weight, and to share it only when you feel it's true. One is a raw performance, the other is a considered craft. But this pressure to perform is only one layer. There's another, more personal reason that ring feels like an intrusion. And this reason has less to do with how others perceive you and everything to do with protecting the quiet, fragile space of your own internal world. Think about the delicate architecture of your mind right before the phone rings. You're untangling a problem, replaying a memory, or just existing in a quiet thought. That ring isn't a gentle knock. It's a cognitive eviction notice. It demands you immediately drop your internal context and adopt an entirely new one, sight unseen. This forced context switching feels exhausting because it is, and the science behind protecting that precious mental space is incredibly clear. This isn't just a feeling, it's a documented cognitive drain. In his influential work on deep work, author Cal Newport explains how unscheduled interruptions shatter our ability to focus. Decades of research on multitasking agree, every switch, no matter how brief, incurs a cognitive cost. A text message respects your internal world. It arrives quietly and waits for you to be ready. A phone call, however, is a demand to abandon your mental state for the callers, effective immediately. That spike of anxiety, then, isn't just about awkwardness. It's a deep protective reflex, your mind defending its own time, focus, and boundaries. So let's reframe this entire feeling. It's not phone anxiety, it's boundary protection. It isn't being antisocial, it's respecting cognitive focus. And understanding this distinction is crucial, even for the people on the other end of the line. Of course, for the person who called, your silence can feel like a real and perhaps unjust rejection. They aren't trying to shatter your focus. They're often just reaching for the spontaneous warmth and texture of a human voice. Their communication architecture is simply different, built around that need for immediate connection. But this raises the classic criticism. Don't you lose all the important nuance this way? But that argument about nuance assumes that vocal tone is always a clear signal. In reality, without facial expressions to guide us, the brain is left guessing. Is that pause a sign of disappointment? Is that tone sarcastic? This ambiguity can actually create more anxiety, not less. Choosing the precision of a written sentence over the potential misinterpretation of a tone isn't a retreat. It's an act of thoughtful communication, which challenges the very idea of authenticity. And this brings us to the biggest myth of all, that texting is somehow less authentic. But ask yourself this, is a thoughtfully written novel less authentic than a rambling, unedited speech? Of course not. They're just different architectures of expression, one of which creates a perfect, lasting record. And then there's the brute fact of memory. After a phone call, your brain doesn't save a transcript. It saves the emotional texture, the main point, and a few key phrases. The rest is a blurry guess. A text, however, is a perfect, searchable record, so when the details truly matter, which medium is actually the more responsible choice? This preference for clarity isn't accidental. It often points to some very deliberate personal traits. In fact, it's a pattern of being a highly deliberate and considerate communicator. It suggests you value precision and clarity, believing that taking a moment to find the right words is an act of respect for the conversation itself. This isn't just about avoiding awkwardness. It's a thoughtful strategy that produces some very specific, powerful advantages. The benefits are profound. Fewer misunderstandings, a permanent record you can trust, and crucially, the space to manage your emotions before responding, which is a superpower in difficult conversations. This isn't a fearful avoidance of a phone call. It is a strategic choice to prioritize clarity over ambiguity and thoughtfulness over raw reaction. So this isn't about declaring war on phone calls. It's about understanding your own architecture so you can navigate those moments with intention. So what's the first practical step? It starts with compassionate boundary setting. Instead of letting the call ring out, try a simple text. Hey, just saw your call. I'm in the middle of something. Can I text you or call back in an hour? This isn't a rejection, it's a bridge. It honors their need for connection while respecting the architecture of your focus. This simple action is a powerful tool, but it only works if you stop using a much harsher tool against yourself, the labels you carry. So let's confront that internal shame spiral, the one that labels you awkward, rude, or anxious every time you let a call go to voicemail. That entire narrative is fundamentally wrong. You've been misdiagnosing a feature of your thoughtful cognitive architecture as a personal flaw. So stop calling yourself awkward. Start calling yourself deliberate. It is time to own your style without apology. You are not avoiding a conversation. You are honoring the need for clarity. Wanting time to think before you speak is not a sign of weakness. It is the very architecture of wisdom. True connection is the goal, and you are allowed to choose the path that feels most authentic to you without apology. In a world that relentlessly demands our immediate reaction, perhaps the most profound form of respect we can show is to offer the quiet sanctuary of time, the space to think, the grace to respond. After reframing awkward as deliberate, what's one label you've been misdiagnosing in yourself that's actually a strength? I want to read your answer in the comments. I reply to every single one. But this need for clarity is just the surface. In our next video, we'll uncover the hidden reason this same trait can make it so hard to trust others. Subscribe and turn on notifications, or you'll miss the truth. Like this if you recognized yourself, and share it with someone who needs this validation.